from Price and Howden. Mr. Davies, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Very good to have you on the programme. Has the reaction since Monday in this country been as you would have predicted, with strong feelings on either side?
Yes, I guess so. I mean, the simple truth is that she's probably one of the greatest prime ministers in peacetime we've had, and we have a saying in Yorkshire, he who makes no mistakes makes an out. So doing a lot of things can sometimes lead to things that hurt people, and that of course happened in some cases. So yeah, I've been entirely pretty much as I expected. I mean, I approve of everything that's been said and done, but it's certainly pretty much what I expected.
Are you disgusted by some of these parties and these celebrations of her death, some of which seem to involve middle-class people, reading some of the articles this morning, and some who couldn't have been born?
Well, that latter point certainly struck me. I mean, they have to square it with their own consciences, but people who are just celebrate the death of anybody, frankly, off the back of what is, in some cases, little more than mythology, is quite extraordinary. The raw truth is, in 1979, when she became Prime Minister, our country was on its knees, on the way down, sinking down to every league table there was. Nobody was taking it seriously. When she went, we'd gone from the sick man of Europe to the envy of the world in many ways. And so, I recognise that, understand it. I mean, Tony Blair has, virtually every Labour leader has, and Liberal leader has. I mean, Paddy Ashdown was one of the most vocal people who said he was a strong antagonist of her when he was leader of the Liberal Party, but when he actually got a job to do something, namely around Bosnia, he was doing exactly the things she was doing.
Interesting as well, reading and talking to some young people. They I don't think they have any idea what life was like in the country in the mid-70s. Fireman strike, firefighter strike, 3-day week, having a... Well, you'll remember this, not that I'm being rude to you, having well, I am being rude to you, but I'll say it anyway, having a rota for when the power was switched off.
Oh, I remember that. I was looking for a job during the 3-day week. I remember being interviewed by a banker. I didn't want to be a banker, but interviewed by this incredibly powerful and senior merchant banker who was saying, "Oh God, it's revolution." And I said, "Don't be silly, it's just a strike." Well, I didn't get the job, obviously, but but I was being interviewed by gaslight, by gas lamp, these little camping lights, in one of the most expensive merchant banks in the city. So yeah, of course it was different, but even on a more mundane scale, I mean, put to one side all the sort of 3-day week stuff and so on, even on a more mundane scale, when we got married, you had to wait 6 months to get your gas cooker installed. It was illegal to put an extension on your own telephone. You only had one sort of telephone, basically. And the services were ridiculous. And that all transformed. Now, some of it's technology, but the vast majority of it was recognising that actually, the government isn't the best person to do everything. It really isn't. And that there are better ways of doing things, and we need to liberate people to do things in the best way in their own interest. And she did that. Now, as I say, it was tough. There's no doubt some communities suffered as a result of it, but it was unfortunately necessary.
And if you were in a mining area today, and if we had somebody on from a mining area, the passion and the fury that they have still is immense, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, and I'd say the same thing to them. I mean, the simple truth is that 30 years ago, when all this was going on, the taxpayer was funding the mining industry by £400 million a year. That's how much money it was losing. Now, that's in those terms. You're talking billions if you put it in today's money. 3/4 of pits were losing money. Something had to be done about it. It was the same. Pretty much every nationalised industry was in the same position. And there are plenty of miners I know as well who don't blame Thatcher. They blame Scargill. So, this was clearly a massive dividing point in our country. But the raw truth is that she said to me, the very last thing she said to me when she was Prime Minister, and I was talking to her about John Major taking over, I said, well, maybe we'll get some consensus in the party, Margaret. She said, consensus is all very well, but only if it's the right consensus. Otherwise, consensus is no use at all. And she recognised that. She recognised sometimes you have to make tough decisions, and she took them. Politicians today talk about taking tough decisions. She actually took them.
Yes, it's interesting you mentioned that, because watching the BBC tribute the other night, and it doesn't matter if you didn't see it, but Neil Kinnock was saying he blames Scargill he didn't blame Thatcher, and you wouldn't expect to hear that, would you?
No, but I mean, I know Neil very well. I mean, I effectively nominated him to be European Commissioner, and I think actually in his heart of heart he knew all that. I mean, he understood that. I mean, remember, his task with dealing with the Labour Party and reforming the Labour Party ran in parallel with her task in reforming the country, you know. And do you remember his famous speech about, sending taxis around Liverpool to hand out redundancy notices? You know, he was dealing with similar sort of problem, much smaller scale, much more manageable, but nevertheless the same sort of problem. So he understood it, and in fact, frankly, all the leaders who were around at the time understood it well. Forgive me, I've got a cold.
Yes, no, I was going to say you're obviously full of it. You sound very nasal. Just reading a text here while we were talking from a listener. We've got our flag at half-mast in honour of Mrs Thatcher. Would she have let all the migrants in? I don't think so. The rent-a-mob protesters at the moment are a disgrace. Interesting, isn't it?
Well, yes and no. I mean, look. I mean, would she have let the migrants in? Probably not. She would have been much tougher about immigration, because she understood. Not because she got anything against the people who want to come here. She would in many ways admire their gumption to try and find a better life for themselves. But because she understood that the balance in our society rests on mutual tolerance and mutual acceptance. You know, the phrase she used to me all the time was this phrase, liberty under the law, you know, and I always thought it was a cliche. It's only since then, with subsequent governments, it hasn't been. But she would have also recognised it's everybody's right to demonstrate. You know, I mean, I had this conversation with her about poll tax demonstrations. She said it's their right to demonstrate. It's their right to make the point they want to make. She understood that, I think, better than most leaders.
It's interesting, that, isn't it? So interesting. The Telegraph and the Mail today lead with this row over whether the BBC should play this song from The Wizard of Oz, Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. It's got to number 1 in the charts apparently today. What do you make of this?
Well, it's tasteless, but you know, I mean, freedom is the right to be wrong, and they're using it to the maximum.
But should things be banned or not?
I'm not a banner of anything. I just think it's tasteless. I mean, if people want to be tasteless, then well, other people will make judgments about them and not about the messages they're trying to portray sometimes.
Very interesting as always to have you on the programme. You need some hot lemon and...
Well, I've got to be better for the funeral, haven't I, really?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
To say I'm looking forward to it's not quite right, but I think Charles Moore is right. It will be a memorable occasion that everybody will look back on and I think crystallise some understanding of the greatness of this woman.
Are you worried at the weekend in London that there might be some awkwardness?
Well, there might be, but again, you know, it's the right to be wrong, the freedom to do things that maybe other people disapprove of. I mean, the freedom doesn't mean anything. I mean, Thatcher understood this better than anybody as well. Freedom doesn't mean anything unless it's the sort of freedom that Voltaire talked about. You know, I disagree with everything you say, but I would defend to the death your right to say it. She understood that. And it was that driving understanding which helped bring down the Soviet Empire, helped her bring freedom to ordinary working people at home, helped her actually deliver on a belief system which has made our country great for centuries, before Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister as well as after.
Very, very interesting to talk with you, David. I wish you well. Hope you feel better soon. Thank you very much indeed.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Take care. There we are. David Davis.